Hello, my name is Angelica Gabriela Hernandez Amaral. Um, I know it sounds like a mouthful, but I like to use my full name when I can. It is the name that was given to me. I was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, and typically in Mexico, they like to include both the father's last name and the mother's last name, so my birth certificate includes both. My mom likes to tell a story about how they couldn't decide what to name me for the first 24 hours that I was alive, and my grandma reminded them that it was the day of El Ángel Gabriel, so they decided to go with Angelica Gabriela. Um, I know my mom always tells me that story, and I never really understood how you didn't have a name and how you needed to go be registered somewhere and then you get a birth certificate. So it's really cool to get to know that part of it. Both my parents are from the same town, Huachinango, Jalisco. Uh, they both have big families. My mom had 11 brothers and sisters. My dad, 9 brothers and sisters. All married, all have multiple kids. We have grown up being around our whole family. I know they bicker here and there like regular siblings do, but we've always been united. Family has always been first in our family, and when it came to knowing our grandparents and our great grandparents, we never really asked any questions. There was a respect. We just needed to be respectful. And as we got older, we obviously had more questions. And I know my mom's side of the family, there was some research done by one of her cousins where they researched going back a couple of generations all the way back to like Spanish roots. Juan Bautista in the late 1800s moved to Mexico. So it was cool to see that, but I never knew about my dad's side of the family. And I know my grandma says that my grandpa didn't know his parents and didn't know that he knew that they came from Zacatecas, which is a completely different state, a little bit far from where Huachinango is. So we never really knew his family. So a couple of years ago, I did a DNA test on Ancestry.com, and I did another one on 23andMe just because I wanted to do both. And it was cool to see what, based on my DNA, where I'm from, but I still felt like I had questions as far as like, how were they? Who were they? What were they about? So, in a recent trip to Mexico, I got a chance to ask my grandma, my dad's mother, more questions about if she knew anything about my grandfather, his family, where they met, how they met. And she said that they met when he moved to Huachinango because there was silver mines there. So he went to work, and then they met and fell in love, got married. He didn't come from money, and my grandma did. So there was a clash there with her family, and they never really liked my grandfather. So, and then not knowing where he came from, it just made it worse for everyone. So, as part of this project, I decided to research more of my dad's side of the family, and I did that through the Ancestry.com, and I was able to trace back a couple of generations and see the different marriage certificates, birth certificates, baptism, everything that have been uploaded into the system. And it was cool to see the different names, and then some of the registrations and the registries showed what they did for a living, how old they were, who they married, how many kids they had. So it was cool to see all of that and see the different names, and I was really hoping I could see some pictures, and there were a couple of pictures, so it was cool to see that. And it was cool to share that with my dad because my communication with my dad has never been very good, and we kind of clashed because I always felt like I didn't have anything in common with him. And with this project, I feel like we have a lot more in common than I thought. One thing that I did find that was very interesting and shocking and sad at the same time was the death certificate of my dad's sister. Because she had a very tragic death by her husband at the time, that was on drugs and strangled her. And my dad had never seen the death certificate. So when I showed it to him, I could tell he got really emotional. And he told me the story about how he was on drugs. He didn't want to be in a relationship anymore. And he felt like he just needed to kill her. And she was pregnant at the time. So it was, and he didn't, my dad never knew like the reason what they told at the hospital or at the government or wherever you go and register, that he never knew what they told them as to what happened. And I mean, it was a little bit hard to see in the death certificate, due to the writing, but we were kind of able to determine that they just put it that she had a blow to the head. And my dad was like, that's not what happened. It was a lot worse than that. And so we kind of talked about that, and he showed me pictures of her, and it was interesting to see the resemblance. I never thought I looked like my dad, but seeing more of his pictures of his family, it just made me see that a little bit more. And then my mom also says that the doctor that tended to her when she first got strangled, my dad's side of the family never liked that doctor because they felt like he was in on it in a way. So, couple of years later, when my mom and dad met, they got married, they had their first child, and my mom ended up having the baby sooner than she was supposed to, came way before the due date, and my dad refused to call that doctor because they didn't trust him. So my mom's, their first child didn't make it. And I never knew that. So it was an emotional conversation to have with both my mom and dad about this, but it made me understand them a little bit more, because we are a big family and we are there for each other, but we didn't know this, and it explains why there's communication issues, because it is hard and it is an emotional conversation to have. But it made me really excited to research all of this and even look into it in the first place, because I'm excited to see what else I can find about my dad's side of the family and what else I can find about my mom's side of the family. So I'm really excited, and I'm really glad that I was able to do this project.